اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد المرسلين. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والبتر الموتور. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مدني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام، وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت، ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها. ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم، ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله، إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان، ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة، ولعن الله ابن مرجان، ولعن الله عمر بن سعد، ولعن الله شمرا، ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عظم مصابي بك، فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بمغالاتي وبالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونصب لك الحال، وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم، وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانه وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشياعكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم، وأتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بمبالاتكم ومبالات بليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحال، وبالبراءة من أشياعهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقنا البراءة من أعدائكم، أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة، وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة، وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله، وأن يرزقني طلب أثاري مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته، مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد، ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية، عليهم منك اللعنة أبد الآبدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعنة منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالمبالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، بلا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا ثم لعن الثانية والثالثة والرابع. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد وشمران وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين، لك على مصابحهم، الحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم البروز، وثبت لي قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا وحجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد والثناء لرب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا والطبيب النفوسنا بالغاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Condolences to the Imam of the age, Imam Mahdi Ajjalallah Ta'ala Farajum al-Sharif, on the martyrdom of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. And according to some riwayat, the end of Safar also marks the martyrdom of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, although what is mashhur and what it seems to be the most reliable tradition regarding Imam Hassan is in an earlier date. Tonight, inshallah, we'll focus some of our topic and discussion on Imam Rida alayhi salam. There was some of the discussion from yesterday, which inshallah will complete that discussion tomorrow, in tomorrow's program. Tonight, we want to delve into a little bit about Imam Rida alayhi salam and some things, inshallah, that we can learn from him. When Imam Rida alayhi salam was forcibly brought to Khurasan or to Tus, it was against what he wanted, and it was part of the Abbasid strategy by bringing the Imam close to them or showing some connection to him or giving him some authority, official or government label or title. By doing that, they wanted to legitimize themselves. In this strategy itself, it says a lot, right? It means that the Abbasid caliphs recognize the legitimacy and the true authority and leadership of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Because of that, they're willing to go through all of these, jump through all of these hoops, so to speak, to try to create this facade of a respectable relationship. This is not something new. This is actually the reason why so many of the verses of the Quran are about the munafiqeen, right? So much is mentioned about those who were the mushrikeen. It was a battle that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, continuously had to deal with. Those people who were not always open enemies were a problem. The open enemies had their own difficulties to deal with, as did those people who were not open enemies, but behind the scenes and would stab you in the back, so to speak. I think about these examples every time, you know, not this year, in the past, it comes up over and over again, where the idea of, which kind of enemy do you want? The one who's open and brash and outspoken, or the one who might seem nicer and smile in your face? What kind of enemy do you want to have? There's arguments for either side. But it speaks to the reason why the Abbasids wanted Imam Rida alayhi salam to be the quote unquote crown prince. And during the lifetime, and Ma'mun al-Abbasi is the one who brought or forced Imam Rida alayhi salam to be brought to Tus. He lived during the span of not just Ma'mun, but also Harun as well. And this is also something that I want to emphasize when we think about what or where authority really comes from. A lot of times we have this idea that authority is something that maybe superficial titles entitle a person to. The reason why the Ahlul Bayt were never seeking out these titles was because their authority was not that superficial. Their authority was wilaya from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have a role of divine authority, which supersedes any kind of label, any kind of title that any person in this world might hold. And so they weren't eager for a title of being the caliph or something of this nature. And this also speaks to the reality behind the role of imamat itself, where it's the position is not as much more than just a position where someone has a label and a title like the president. They're in charge of some things. They have maybe arbitrarily or without good justification come into their position. This is very different than the role of the imamat. And so when people say things like this was the imams just were a succession of one another, of the father, for example, a succession of their father. One of the things that we have to understand is that the relationship with of the imams with one another does not have any contradiction with their appointment being divine. Many of the prophets were related to one another. Does their relation was not the cause for them to be appointed. It wasn't something where, Prophet Musa decided that, for example, Harun, where Moses decides that Aaron will be a prophet. It was Allah appointing him. In the Quran and those verses, Prophet Musa is asking Allah to give him someone to help him. And as such, that person is appointed. Prophet Harun is appointed. And so appointment makes sense because this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing the person who is worthy and fit to lead the Muslim Ummah. So the Imam is not infatuated with some kind of superficial position by any means. His position is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to understand about this idea of status. And what does that mean to have some status in society amongst people? Imam Rida alayhi salam was known for his character, for his akhlaq, for how he treated others, for his spirituality, for his knowledge. We have an idea that the person who is an abd and truly a servant and subservient to the will and command of God, by the will of Allah, creation and everything else becomes subservient to that person. But being the abd, being the servant, ubudiyya, servitude itself, this is the step towards becoming so near to Allah and so dear to Him. Then that manifestation of taqarrub ilallah in its spiritual sense, that as you become nearer to Him, the world becomes more subservient. Let me put this into another example. You know, when we touched on a little bit about how the Prophet of Allah would emphasize salat and prayer. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, not being of those people who take their prayers lightly. Taking prayer lightly can mean not praying on time. Praying, but I pray, you know, some people, they're busy, they work a rigorous schedule, and so they're making up, 17 rakats at the end of the day. Not able to fit time for their prayers. Or they're praying, maybe even on time, but with no consciousness between their initial takbiratul ihram and their final salam. Something happened. We can't even say that it was truly prayer. There were some movements. Might have been yoga or Pilates for all that matters. It was some movements that happened and then it ended. They said some dhikrs in the middle of that, but their consciousness and their mind and their hearts were attached to this place, to that place, to other distractions and worldly things. But if we pay attention to our prayers, and as I mentioned, the kalamat, the harakat, the sakanat, the words that we say, the movements that we are making, the moments when we are still in prayer, right? The moments of stillness and no movements, the different forms of movements, all of these things, if we pay close attention to detail, right? It's also a part of the job description for believers and mu'mineen. But as you're reciting your tashahhud, one of the things that you say about Rasulullah and about the Prophet is abduhu wa rasuluh. Abduhu wa rasuluh. Abd is first. And there's a hikmah and reason to that. That the Prophet of Allah was abd and he was a servant of Allah first, wa rasuluhu. And in relation to that servitude, that station of risala is what is deserving for him. Right? And by the command of Allah, you can see the spiritual effect and impact that someone like the Prophet of Allah has on the entire world. And the same for all of the Ahl al-Bayt. Imam Rida alayhi salam, no exception. Imam Rida was well loved by the people. If he wasn't someone that the Abbasis wanted to keep close to them, he was still already well loved by the people because of that beautiful spirituality that he had, that they were drawn to, that their hearts were subservient to. His authority was from Allah. One of the things that we can really learn from Imam Rida alayhi salam was that he did not, even though he was humble, he was not, uh, he did not allow for himself to be degraded by those who were oppressors. The fine balance of a believer. He has a state of humbleness and humility to Allah, but he doesn't go to the oppressors and humiliate himself before them. There's a big difference, right? And this tawadhu and this humbleness is something that Imam Rida alayhi salam speaks about, and he advises about what that should look like. One of the things that he mentions about the tawadhu, he says that it has different degrees, has different stations, different levels. And he says part of tawadhu itself is to recognize where your station is, where your position is, and to stay at that degree. For example, if you are a companion of the Imam, then recognize you as a companion of the Imam. Don't go beyond this role that you have. Don't go beyond that to try to speak out of turn or to take authority that you do not truly have. As they say, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. If you are at this level, then stay in your position, in your lane. Imam Rida alayhi salam is talking about tawadhu itself and how knowing your limitation is a part of tawadhu. This means that self-awareness is a part of tawadhu, is a part of humbleness. How can someone be humble if they don't know where they're supposed to stand? They might think that, they might not understand what is humbleness. You can't see where your own position is. Where do you stand? Where is your authority? Where is your role? If you have a team that has a coach, that has a manager, that has a team owner, and that has players, and then they has trainers, and they have fans. If a fan comes over and starts to tell the coach how to do things, he might be outside of his role, right? The coach might say, slow your roll. This is what I do. This is my job. This is my experience. You're going outside of that. It's going outside of that station of what it means to be humble. When it comes to how we speak, how we advise people, one of the things which is usually free but not always good is advice, and that often includes bad advice. Right? Someone sharing and giving out bad advice, they're going outside of their parameters. They're going outside of their lane. The Imam emphasizes about qalbun salim, that pure heart. This is a part of tawadhu. He put a lot of emphasis on that. You can't have this tawadu without having that sincerity at heart or having that pure heart. On the day of judgment, it is only the qalbun salim that's going to be beneficial to a person. أفضل العبادة الإخلاص. The greatest of worship is sincerity itself. When that sincerity manifests, it will look like tawadu. It will look like humility. It will look like this humbleness. The A'imma were people who depth of knowledge. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, for example, had students who he taught of sciences, and so many different students, thousands of students, and he was teaching them in addition to the exegeses and tafasir and fiqh, and jurisprudence, and the sciences of hadith and the Islamic traditions and prophetic traditions. He was also teaching them tib, medicine, also teaching them mathematics. Even when they used to refer to someone as being a philosopher, back in the day, of that meant someone who they knew all of these, they had all kinds of knowledge, right? The Ibn Sinas, the Mullah Sadrs, all kinds of knowledge were in their repertoire. And not just one part of knowledge. And why this is important, there's obviously a book called Tibb al-Ridha, Medicine of Ridha, and there are people who focus on the study of what ahadith have said in respect to different sciences, particularly medicine. But what this also gives us an understanding of is that there is a broad repertoire of when it comes to knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt. Simultaneously understanding what the Imam is talking about in terms of humbleness and tawadu, we can connect those dots and understand what the hadith have said when they say that one of the thamaratul ilm, the fruit of knowledge, is a tawadu itself, is this humbleness. The person who learns of two things and thinks that now they have some kind of authority has really not understood what knowledge is, has not understood in respect to God and his creation and all that God knows, what his little bit of knowledge is, that dot, where it's almost like it's nothing. But the way that the Ahl al-Bayt carried themselves, it was proof of their knowledge, their existence, and their servitude to Allah was proof of that. There was a person who was trying to explain to an atheist in the most simple terms about God or about the idea of intelligent design. So it seems like after some time of trying different explanations, the atheist was rejecting everything. And so this person kind of came to a conclusion and said, let me explain to you like this. He drew a big circle, huge circle. I think maybe it was on a whiteboard or something. He said, let's say that this is everything that there is to possibly know in the universe, every single thing, all these things that are unknown. And this dot represents you. Isn't it possible, at least fathomable, that there is so much in the world, so much in the universe, so much about existence and creation that you don't know? He kind of pigeonholed them. There was no room to go away from that argument. Yes, there are going to be things that you didn't know. That would be the logical, intellectual answer. Of course. And if there are things that you didn't know, maybe one of those things is understanding about God himself and understanding about this intelligent design or the vastness of this universe or the dawn of creation or the many creations that came before those creations and so on and so forth. If a person realizes how vast Allah's knowledge is, then that should make their hearts become humble. The other part of this is about prestige. And as I said, the prestige of the Imam was what Allah gave to him in appointing him as the rightful Imam. And obviously, this is a time of difficulty for the Muslim Ummah in many ways, because there are some who stopped following the chain of the Imams, the Waqifites. And so it's a test for the Muslim Ummah in general. But the matter of prestige and that position and station being only from Allah is something that we can apply to so much of the situations that we have in our communities. Things that are very common in how we deal with things. There's a hadith that talks about when Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajum Sharif, when he returns. There are going to be people, it says, and one of the traditions is mentioned or related to Imam Baqir alayhi salam, says that there will be people who claim to be the friends and the companions and the near ones of the Imam, and they will be the ones to unsheath swords. They will be the ones to fight against him. And there will be some who these people are not even monotheist. Mentions they are worshiping other things, the sun or the stars. And it says they will join the ranks of the Imam. They will become abd, subservient to him and his command. So what is it in these people, that other group who were already Muslim, who are already reciting dua faraj, who are doing all of the duas that you can list, who were always in the masjid, who listened to the most amount of majalis, who always recited Allahumma kulli waliyyak, who recited so much Quran, who believed in the Imam? How could those people be the ones to fight against him? How could some people who are outside and outside of that fold, so to speak, become people who join the ranks of the Imam? This goes back to that importance of that tawadhu and that humbleness that a person has or doesn't have. That shouldn't be a surprise to us when we look at the history of people. When some will rise up to fight against and behead Imam al-Hussayn alayhi salam, when they saw him as a child being one of the most beloved people to the Prophet of Allah. And they themselves consider themselves Muslim. How then did they go and fight against Imam Hussayn? Let's think about this. Were the people who fought against Imam Hussayn some people who said we're not Muslim? No, they said we are Muslims. Were the people who murdered Muslim people, Muslim Ibn Aqil, people who said they were not Muslim, or Hani? These were people who claimed to be Muslim. But who were they subservient to? Who were they following? Who were they really worshiping? Their nafs, themselves, some position. When it talks about Umar ibn Sa'd, forever in history as the mal'oon, a cursed person, earned this title. And what was promised to him was that after you kill Imam Hussain, just bring me his head, you'll get him, you'll be in charge of this area or this place in this town. And so he was abd for that town, for that place. When we become subservient to things other than Allah, that is the moment when, in the view of some of the Urafa, they would consider that in and of itself to be a type of shirk, actually. But when we do that, we distance ourselves from Allah. We distance ourselves from our Imam. I have to think that there are people, they know better than the Imam. Because it's happened. If we learn anything from history, we will see that that has happened before. It's no surprise when, we have a masjid and people think they know better than the Sheikh. Of course they're going to think that. And they thought they knew better than the Prophet. They thought they knew better than the greatest of Allah's creation. Who is this? Who is anyone else to think that there won't be the same level of ignorance in our time, in our era? And this brings me back to the point about that authority that's given from God as opposed to what we think prestige is. If a person takes that path of ubudiyah, then through their kindness to others, through their worship, through their charity, through their good deeds, they attain a position and station in Allah. Whether people come to know or realize that completely or not is a different matter. But much of the time, we seek out prestige through other means. I live in this neighborhood. This is very prestigious. There was a person who, they were an immigrant. They came here, worked, got a good job in something in IT, and they're talking about how, the neighborhood that they finally, they're moving on up, and they moved to this expensive neighborhood, and they were very proud the way they talked about it. They said, oh my gosh, in our neighborhood, there are just white people everywhere. As if that was a measure of success. That was a matter of prestige for them. That I live in this very affluent neighborhood where everyone is white, and so ergo, I should be a person that deserves some kind of respect. Or that's a matter that is deserving of prestige. It's silly when you think about it. When you mention it, it's silly, but these are the thoughts that people have. If the imam was here right now, the same person who feels that they have so much prestige in a piece of paper, a degree from some university, ABCU gave them some piece of paper that says that they are an expert in some very particular field, that they would think that they know better than the imam of their time? Of course, because it happened before. Of course they will. This will happen again. And this is something that in the Muslim community we have to open our eyes and become mindful about. I'm speaking especially to people who are immigrants and come to America, and part of the goal of coming here is to achieve some financial success or to get away from some difficulties uh, in their homeland, and going to school. And some of my Desi or in Indian and Pakistani friends joke about having the option of either becoming a doctor or an engineer, or maybe pharmacy. That, there's a couple of ways where you're going to make it, or this is the path and you have to do this because this is what is prestige and this is what is success. But how do we really determine that? Is that what true success is? And if we go to gain and feel that we are deserving of some level of authority after we achieve some degree or some status in society, a paper that we can stick on the wall, after achieving that, if we think that now we are more worthy, then we're going outside of that boundary that the Imam is talking about. Let's think about even during the time of the prophets and the Imam, there were always people like this. They think that they know better. Yes, you are the Imam. Yes, you are the prophet. Yes, you are the leader of all of humanity. But I think this and this and this. And some of them had lesser superficial status, let alone today. We don't think that our superficial status will come to, if we're not still humble, that will become something that's negative for us. The source of the problem is our seeking out validation from Western society to cause us to feel that we are enough, that our religion of Islam is a solution and enough. So you have people who are Muslim, who are followers of the Ahl al-Bayt, and then they'll come to a sheikh after they've gone to, 5 different shrinks, psychologists and therapists, trying to figure out their marital problems, trying to figure out their family problems, their problems that parents are having with children, trying to figure things out. Eventually, they'll come to the sheikh and we need some help. Because why? Because the non-Muslim person with all of those degrees couldn't solve your problem? Are we really surprised? Why did we put so much stock and value in the system other than Islam? Don't get me wrong. I'm not a proponent of everything that is not, Hausa is bad or something like that. My point is that when we want to put into perspective what has value, there's nothing going to supersede Allah and the Quran and the religion of Allah. If we begin to put other things higher than that, then how can we value our Imam? How can we value his teachings? People will look at Imam Mahdi, Ajalullah Ta'ala Farajum Sharif, when he comes and say to themselves, well, I went to Harvard and the Imam didn't. With all due respect, I went to ABCU and I know about such and such a thing, as if The Imam does not. But this value, this is a different value system, the different theoretical framework, a different currency. We're dealing in, as a Muslim, we're dealing in a spiritual currency. We're dealing in a currency of gold, and you're going to get answers from somebody who's dealing in a currency of banana chips? That's never going to work. I've been sitting with people and they say, we have gone to this person and that shrink and that psychologist, and there's nothing wrong with psychology. Anything that doesn't contradict Islam, it's a part of knowledge. We don't see knowledge as being secular and non-secular from an Islamic. I mean, there's just ilm. There's just ilm. There's just knowledge. And within that knowledge, there are different fields. This idea of secular versus non-secular, this is a big sham. It's a way of othering everything that has a religious ideal altogether. It's a way of moving away from metaphysical sciences and just focusing on material and becoming materialistic in the process. But when someone comes to me and says that, we sat down with this person, that person could not solve the problem, I have to ask, did you not consider what Islam says? If we are to be followers of the Ahlul Bayt, if we are to be along their path, then we have to give value to what they gave value and give value to. And that is Islam itself. We have to learn that our ubudiyyat and our servitude has to be toward the Ahl al-Bayt, towards the teachings of the Ahl al-Bayt. Servitude cannot be drifting and distracted with all of the different things in this material world, with these false accolades, which are not necessarily any indication of someone's spiritual status. And so by gaining those false accolades of what are considered prestige, this kind of car, that kind of home, looking a certain type of way, or this kind of phenotype, that kind of degree, from this kind of place, we can't get sucked into seeing these as end goals or as a type of status or position. Imam Rida alayhi salam was not concerned at all. You want me to be considered the crown prince? I'm the crown prince of the earth by the will of Allah. And Abbas says nothing on that. So inshallah we learn this lesson of what is true tawadhu, what is true spirituality, what is true prestige from Imam Rida alayhi salam. One of the quotes which always makes your bones shiver to hear is when Imam Rida alayhi salam says, and he's speaking about the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, and he says, Ma minna illa masmoom aw maqtul. Where he's talking about that there are none of us, Ahl al-Bayt, who are not either poisoned or martyred. And that is a great tragedy for us and for the Muslim Ummah, even if it means that they will achieve the highest rank of istishhad, of shahada, of martyrdom. لا تحبسن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله. Assume those who die in the way of Allah that they are dead. Those who are murdered in the way of Allah, don't. They're dead. They are alive. Their Lord being provided for. And the proof of this is in Mashhad itself. And if you've never had the opportunity to go to ziyarah, I know that we are living in strange COVID times, but if you have the opportunity to see and witness the magnificence of holy shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam, it is something phenomenal to see. It is something beautiful and miraculous to see. And I'll end on just sharing uh, one opportunity. I was visiting in Iran, and I was trying to figure out, because I had a short stay, maybe a week or so, and I was trying to figure out what day, if I would, if any, be able to go to Mashhad and to do ziyarat of Imam Rida alayhi salam. And I found out that, I could go, but it would have to be, there was a ticket that I would have to leave. I had just arrived in Tehran. I was going to have to leave like the same day or the next day, and I would only be able to stay for one day. So I was going to get there in the afternoon and then go to a hotel, do my ziyarat, leave sometime the next day. And so I did that. I took the plane. I went to Mashhad. When I went to Mashhad, I was so refreshed to be, walking towards the haram. And I thought to myself, let me, find a hotel that's right nearby the haram. And then there was a part of me that felt like, let me go do ziyarat first. I didn't bring a lot of stuff with me. I have, one bag. And so let me just put this bag at the gate and go and do my ziyarat. Then I'll come back and see about getting a hotel. And being in the shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam was something that was phenomenal. And this was not my first visit, but it was still nonetheless not any less spiritual. And it was such a beautiful moment that I didn't want to leave and go to the hotel. I thought to myself, if I go to the hotel, that means I'm going to miss some time here. If I go and I want to check in and I want to do all of these things and it's going to take time. So I said, maybe I'll go a little later and let me stay a little while longer. The long story short is that, it was becoming in the evening and I hadn't left the shrine. And as I sat there, I saw so many people there. And there were people who also came there and sat there for hours, recited prayers, recited ziyarat. And it never stopped being crowded. I thought to myself, maybe, when it gets a little later in the night, it'll be a little bit less crowded. If you want to touch the zari, the shrine itself, then maybe it'll be less people, it'll be easier. And I went to get a bite to eat, came back, stayed for a few more hours. It's midnight and it never got, not busy. And there were people worshiping and doing dua. It made me think about how there is nothing that Allah created more than angels, than malaik. And that there are some angels whose only purpose is to do sajda. Some maybe all they do is prostrate. Some maybe all they do is pray. Like their entire being in existence. And so there's a constant state of humility and humbleness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the angels unanimously always have. And that's consistent and has been always. And when you're in that around that many people in the shrine, you're seeing all kinds of ibadah and worship happening, and it's like that kind of angelic manifestation of ubudiyyat that we're seeing. And it stayed like that. I ultimately decided it wasn't even worth going to a hotel. I have to leave tomorrow. I'm staying as long as I can stay. And I sat and read and recited, and along with other people, listened to beautiful recitations, and well until we heard the call for the morning prayer. And it was Fajr time. And now, different waves of people were entering at different times. One of the things that the Imam of Salat in the morning prayer, after we made Fajr at Imam Rida's shrine, after we performed Ziyarat, the Imam stood up to say a hadith. The hadith resonates with me so much, and I think it connects, and inshallah you can all appreciate, and this that we've gone, a little bit of a longer talk. But he mentioned people approach you and they have some need, they have some hajat. Someone comes, brother, can you help do this? Can you volunteer with that? I'm having this problem. Can you help with this? They're doing a fundraising. Who wants to donate to this? Those are different hajat. Those are different needs that people are seeking. And he said that in the hadith, and I don't want to misquote which imam it was from, but in the hadith, it was saying that you should be honored and proud when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses you and gives you that authority and that spiritual responsibility to be the one through which he answers the hajat of some mu'mini. Subhanallah. When someone asks us for something, we feel bothered. We feel annoyed. We don't think about answering the hajat of mu'mineen, that we're doing God's work. SubhanAllah, it's a different way to look at things. And all of the people, millions that go to Mashhad, it's an honor that the Imam is in a position by the will of Allah through which he answers the hajat of the mu'mineen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Hussayn Mawla. It has been 1400 years since a sacrifice. Every time I remember his martyrdom, my heart cries. Instead of loving thee, son of Rasulullah, they slaughtered him with thirsty lips in the land of Karbala. Instead of loving thee, son of Rasulullah, they slaughtered him with thirsty lips in the land of Karbala. Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Hussayn Mawla. For the followers of Ali and lovers of Zahra, every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala. For the followers of Ali and lovers of Zahra, every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala. We say until our death, لبيك يا حسين بأبي أنت وأمي يا مولا مولا حسين مولا مولا حسين مولا مولا حسين مولا حسين مولا مولا حسين مولا مولا حسين مولا مولا حسين مولا حسين مولا. If you wanna become a true Shia of Mahdi, every day live your life based on the teachings of Mahdi. If you wanna become a true Shia of Mahdi, every day live your life based on the teachings of Mahdi. Those who didn't follow the Na'ib of Hussayn, in Karbala they killed Hussayn and children of Hussayn. Those who betrayed Muslim, the Na'ib of Hussayn, in Karbala they killed Hussayn and children of Hussayn. Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla. Every time we say Ajjal fi Faraj Mawla, every time we say Ajjal fi Faraj Mawla, remember the Kufis also invited their Mawla. Remember the Kufis also invited their Mawla. The people of Kufa betrayed son of Zahra, sold their faith, broke their promise and betrayed him for dunya. The people of Kufa betrayed son of Zahra, sold their faith, broke their promise and betrayed him for dunya. Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla, Mawla Hussayn Mawla Hussayn Mawla. Assalamu alayka ya Rasul Allah, Assalamu alayka ya Habib Allah, Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Assalamu alayka ya Sayyid al-Wasi, Assalamu alayka ya Fatima al-Zahra, سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام على الحسن وعلى علي بن الحسن وعلى أولاد الحسن وعلى أصحاب الحسن. السلام عليك يا سيدي ومولاي يا أبا الفضل العباس رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا بنت أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا زينب عقيلة السادات رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجن. السلام عليك يا بقية الله في أرضه، وعجل الله تعالى فرجك، وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك، واجعلنا من خير أعوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.